First, I would say it wasn't a big splashy story, but kind of a funny one, I guess. So there was this developer that had this tool that's like a Chrome extension, basically, that you install it and it lets you unfollow everybody on Facebook. And, it probably taps into, I'm sure, some like non-public APIs or whatever, and find some way to automatically unfollow everybody. Not the end of the world. If you want to unfollow everybody at once, Facebook should offer the tool first party. But since they don't, this guy made it, or girl, I guess I don't know. And then it's just kind of funny that Facebook shuts it down, and then we have Mark Zuck posting about all the kind of controversy that was going on last week with Senate hearings and the Facebook files and all that. And it's just the first line of the post itself is, they want to put safety and well-being over profits, but ultimately, if people just want to unfollow everybody, let them unfollow everybody. Like, what's the lock in here, right? At the end of the day, you're not making anybody happy by preventing it. But I guess that's just kind of what they do. But I think it's just a pretty telling sign of maybe, PR speech versus company actions, right?
Yeah, actions speak louder than words. So
always do, yeah.
Yeah, so you don't have to look at the PR speak in this case. Straightforward. Follow all the actions. You know what Facebook is all about.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not that hard to figure out here. I mean, if you are really, utmost worried about privacy and things like that, you give people the option. You make it easy for them. You try to convince them by your actions that you should stay on Facebook and take advantage of all the things that are going on. But if for whatever reason you feel like it's time for you to exit the stage and your data comes with you, why not offer it? Of course, you're going to lose a certain portion of people, but I think the overall net is, people are going to trust you more. And when people trust you more, guess what? They may come back or they may stay and say, well, at least I got the option. I'll keep that in mind, but I'll stick around for the time being.
Yeah, I think the Facebook is making the transition, just like Google made the transition towards becoming, ads company, also doing search. Facebook started as a social network company, and now they're moving towards, privacy abuse as a service. So, just like we have software as a service, I think we have to invent a word called PaaS, or privacy abuse as a service. And unfortunately, we have a lot of them.
Yeah.
I'm sure we can come up with some kind of chart to map them all, and maybe that can be one of the things we do later, like an annual charting.
Yeah, I think we have our work cut out for us on that one.
So you're talking about a magic quadrant for PaaS, Tejas?
Yeah, but I have a feeling that maybe vendors might not be so willing to do interviews and fill out questionnaires and stuff like that. But we can do our own research. That's no big deal.
I think the vendors would like to take a pass on that one.
Oh, God. All right, Brent, that's it. We're moving on. We're moving on. Another story that was, I guess, not so much on the privacy sense, but it kind of went down that route. So Malwarebytes is kind of like a popular software, and they announced that they're basically offering a VPN service. Sounds good. No big deal. Inside the article, they kind of talk about how they're not tracking telemetry. They're not going to collect user logs. All this sounds great. Being able to connect from 180 servers across 30 countries, all of this sounds great. And, there's a little bit of controversy. This article is really kind of focused on, this VPN that they're offering is really just kind of like a white labeled of another service. That's not really the important part. The best part that I found, though, was actually buried in some comments on Hacker News. And so there's a user there that basically saw that inside that article that was writing about this kind of abuse and shadiness of the company, essentially, they have a file that's hosted on the website that's masked as a GIF file. You can see the URL kind of on the screen. It's obviously a very ugly URL that they kind of use to track. And if you click on that GIF file, which is you would think would be an image or something along those lines, what actually returns is all the information about the user. So they basically not found a way, I'm sure this probably isn't the first, and other people probably do the same thing, but your browser is not going to block these kinds of like images and GIFs that it expects are just natural pieces of content to be displayed on a page, but it might block like a JavaScript snippet that's hosted on some third-party website through some ad blockers or something along those lines. But what this GIF does is actually it's just masked to run a function that goes and does the fingerprinting of the user, right? So it'll track the user's IP address, where they're coming from, their connection information, all that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, part of it's the irony of like a company writing a blog post calling out someone else for shady behavior, but then they're doing this shadiness on their own. But it also just kind of creeps you out a little bit more because you don't know. I mean, if you can't trust like an image file from loading on the page, then like what are we really doing, right? Like at the end of the day, like, you know, when you get an email, you can simply say don't load the images, but on a web page, images are kind of crucial, right? Every component, a lot of CSS styling and like how the page is designed is all based on these images, and hidden pixels and small kind of, I would say, user tracking hacks like this, I think are a lot more rampant than people think. And it takes a lot of effort to really dig into like source code and figure things out to find out where this kind of abuse is happening, because a web page could have thousands of lines of code and no one's going to go through and figure out where exactly that fingerprinting is happening. Luckily, the smart person on Hacker News found it. But it was just kind of a sign of, I guess you don't really know what you're even loading on a web page anymore, right?
And this is what happens when you have a lot of smart people, PhDs, and smart people getting into figuring out how to abuse people's privacy and coming up with some innovative ways. I'm sure there are hundreds of such I guess tricks that are being played at this point to grab all that information. So this is not surprising, but again, at some point we have to go back and say, at least the individuals have to go back and say, is this what we want to be working on? But yeah, this is not the first time, and this will not be the last time.
I had to take a real close look at this code because, our buddy Paul Greenberg lives in Manassas. I was like, and I think that's his zip code too. So, I'm just gonna leave it. Matter of fact, I'm getting this off the screen right now. So, we might be sending people to our buddy's house. So.
Another article that I thought was pretty interesting is, I don't think we've talked too much about this company, but it's definitely, I think, one of the shadiest companies, probably top 5 award if I was to give them out in the States, Clearview AI. And so if you're not familiar with Clearview AI, what they basically do is they partner with a bunch of law enforcement, government and local, or federal and local, and they offer AI-based facial detection services and a wide range of services that they offer law enforcement. And the way they do this is basically, there's been a lot of controversy around them. They scrape an insane amount of data and images, or not data, more so images, off the internet. They got into some spats with like Facebook because they were basically scraping Facebook profile pictures and all of your pictures on Facebook that are relatively public, but normally you'd need to be logged into Facebook to be able to access them. And they would, create some sophisticated way to basically go and download all these images, apply facial recognition, and search them. And, first of all, maybe it's not best for a private company to be doing literally facial recognition as a service is what they're offering completely. And one of the lines here is crazy, that the CEO basically says that they're working on new features to make blurry images sharper. Sounds good in theory, but also means that images of lower resolution where you're in the background can easily be identified now, and make it possible to recognize people even if they're wearing masks, right? So then, I thought masks are kind of a good way to protect yourself from privacy in general. Like, you wouldn't be surveilled as much, but if you're being able to identify people based on that, I guess what do you really do to even protect yourself, right? And so I'm pretty sure these guys have something. I'll probably get this number wrong, but it's definitely in the league of billions in terms of the amount of people's profiles that they have analyzed so far. So it's not like a small number, it's a good chunk. They only operate, I think, in the US. And so at least that's what they say. But if you partner with, governments, who knows where that really leads down. But have you guys heard of Clearview AI before? Or how do you feel about this company doing basically all this work? I mean, if the government, like the NSA or whatever, if they're doing it all, I guess you don't really have a choice. But now that the government's partnering with this private company, and where that private company has other partnerships that you don't know about, it's kind of messy. It kind of reminds me of the Ring partnership with local governments and polices, right? They were sharing Ring camera, doorbell camera and stuff like that, video feeds directly with police officers or police departments without any kind of indication. And then eventually Ring stepped back, and they basically said you have to opt into this program, and a bunch of changes were put into place. But ultimately, originally, the plan sounds good in theory, sharing your video feed information to catch a a criminal or something, but then ultimately slippery slope, which is just kind of, I think, the theme of the show in general.
And the moment one is the technology itself is new, facial recognition, and particularly when you consider something like blurry images and whatnot, then using that for protection purposes or legal purposes or identifying an individual when the technology is itself in an experimental stage is questionable. So what if you identify the wrong person? And this has happened in the past. Even recently, it has happened where you identified the wrong person and you basically file charges against him, and that impacts someone's life because it is an algorithm that screwed it up. And that is something that we should not be deploying yet. I think we are far away from that point. Then the point about them being based in US, not surprising. Well, another way to look at it is, why do cruise companies are based in Cayman Islands? Let's just say it is tax friendly, and Clearview, clearly a front runner in our privacy abuse as a service.
I was literally getting ready to say they got to be like the first nominee. I mean, look, and we spend a lot of time talking about like the big guys, the FANG folks, and rightfully so. When they can touch so many people around the world, and any policy or any tweak they make has tremendous impact. But you got a company like Clearview who is basically ignoring the pressure that these guys are trying to place on them. I mean, damn, how bad a company do you have to be to ignore those dudes?
But I think the most chilling probably thing is that you have heavy hitters, Facebook and Google, no shortage of like lawyers and legal funds whatsoever, right? But because Clearview partners with law enforcement and the government, who do you think is really protected in this kind of situation, right? Like you're not really going after them. And I think there's probably a lot of such companies like Clearview that you have no idea. I would put Clearview in its own category of nefariousness, basically, because with Facebook and Google, you're supplying a good chunk of that information, and you feel like there's some exchange of value, whatever it is, for information you provide, not counting like the third-party website tracking and all that kind of stuff. But with Clearview, people have never signed up for the service, and they will search Google basically and then just take your images results and just run through every single one and categorize them and create a profile on you. And I feel like there was a while ago, I'll have to dig up the article, but there are examples of people basically trying to get their information removed from that database and having difficulty or not being able to do it, which also is a bigger problem. So you've never signed up for this service, just like those directory services like whitepages.com or 411.com or whatever these other ones that we talked about in the earlier episodes. This is the same way. You've never signed up for something. They've basically scraped the internet for information on you, created a profile on you, shared that profile information with a bunch of different services with no opt-out, no consent. Maybe it's a better way to categorize it is probably in the league of like credit companies, right? Equifax and TransUnion and Experian and things like that, because you've never signed up for that service, but that service basically determines your potential future actions because of some profile that's created on you on a bunch of facts that you never opted into. So maybe we'll have to create a couple different of these quadrants and charts based on like the type of business they're in.
And also, as I was saying earlier, they are based in US and they don't operate in Europe because at this point, US doesn't have any laws in privacy. So in other words, they are setting up in a country where the laws are privacy abuse friendly. Until that changes, we'll continue to see this. Just like the cruise companies or several other travel companies are in Cayman Island, or maybe use a different example, cryptocurrencies. You don't find a lot of cryptocurrencies come out of China or India, right? So the companies move towards countries that are friendly for their business model. In this case, the business model itself is privacy abuse, and they're based in US. And I'm hoping to see some laws that protect people's privacies. Till then, they'll continue to do it. They're not operating in Europe because they are protecting the privacy of the citizens there. So I can't wait to see some laws in there from US.
So basically, what we're saying is, like the Caymans is like a tax shelter, a tax haven, I guess. So the U.S. is basically a privacy haven. You come
Yeah.
here to if you want to abuse people's privacies, you set your company up here.
Privacy
Wow.
abuse haven. Privacy abuse haven. Actually, Cayman is actually privacy friendly.
Yeah,
As a
you
country.
can't know
So,
who's running those companies and stuff like that.
so it's the opposite of Cayman for such privacy abuse companies.
And I love that Tejas has already created. There's the nefarious category under the pass awards. I
We'll come
mean,
up with a full rating system.
that's right. That's a good one.
I think we should. I mean, we can add. I thought finally government did something good here. There was an article saying the FTC is going to fine companies using fake reviews, and so I mean, Dunkin' Donuts is in the subline, and I don't know why Dunkin' Donuts is in the league of fake reviews. How many people are saying that their coffee or donuts are that good? Fake reviews at Dunkin' Donuts is a big problem. I didn't know about it. I thought like Yelp would be a bigger offender, Amazon would be a bigger offender, Google would be a bigger offender. Macy's was even a confusing one to me. But yeah, like I think fake reviews are a massive problem, and I don't think platforms do enough to curtail them because ultimately, the more reviews you have on your website, the better it's going to look. And so, I mean, there's a great website. I think it's FakeSpot. Yeah, I'm pretty sure FakeSpot.com that you plug in like an Amazon URL and it'll go through all the reviews and say, you know, what's the likelihood of the reviews being fake? And you'll get like a grade between like A and F and it'll track everything, right? So the fact that someone else has to make an entire website to filter through fake Amazon reviews, and Amazon themselves don't do it because to them, if you see a product on their website that has 10,000 reviews, 20,000 reviews, you're like, oh snap, 20,000 people reviewed this, which means millions of people probably bought it. It must be a good product. I don't even need to shop anymore. And so a lot of these companies, I mean, I've bought like all sorts of like random cables and electronics, and always in the box, it's like, you know, oftentimes before, I think Amazon started cutting down on this, but before it was leave us a review and we'll send you like a $5 Amazon gift card or a $10 Amazon gift card, or we'll send you another one of the same product for free. And then I think Amazon said you're not supposed to pay for these kinds of reviews and stuff like that, but people still do, and I don't think they're chomping down on it as much. But in general, just I think reviews build trust, and the fact that companies allow rampant like fake ones is just bad, right? But it's purely selfishly motivated.
That happens because now there are dedicated companies built to give you reviews. That is their business model.
Yes.
You pay them enough money, they'll get you X number of reviews, and the number of reviews you get is based on the amount you pay. Guess what? They're maximizing their revenue, and this is going to be rampant. And I'm really glad to see FTC make a move on this. We need a lot more like these.
Yeah, no, these reviews have become a cottage industry because of just like what you were saying, Tejas, the critical importance to selling stuff, all sorts of stuff, is you don't really people don't really trust the marketing. They tend to trust other people like them who are leaving, you know, comments and reviews. And you know, the sellers, and this is actually a really big problem for the big marketplaces because they're third-party sellers. A lot of them are trying to do things with, you know, get around, you know, to get this stuff up there, and it's almost like a whack-a-mole. And I do think you're going to see a lot more focus coming from the big marketplaces on this because the problem is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and becoming more exposed more because people have a platform of saying, hey, look at this. You know, I bought this because of this terrible review, and now I find out it's fake. Yeah, that kind of stuff is not good for the big guys or for the little guys, and especially isn't good for the consumer.
Yeah, the concept of reviews, you know, goes beyond the product purchases, where the business models are also tangential. We talked about VPN, I think, a couple of episodes back. Why does a VPN company own a review site, right? And how does that review site gather reviews? Well, because every vendor wants their product to be reviewed well, they basically have their users go there and provide some incentives to their users to go there and write a review. So the review sites get their content created by the product they are featuring in there for free, and the vendor themselves pays or you know, maybe directly or indirectly for that review to be written. So it is not just that. So it's not just a product and a review, but then there are review sites with reviews that are also being so-called user-generated content being used for this. So the entire system is actually being broken and abused. And if you look at why is that happening? Because when you search for a particular product in Google, the first set of sites that come in are review sites. That is the reason some of the VPN companies themselves are buying review sites, because they have the results shown up on the first page, and being in the first page is important. Otherwise, you have to pay a premium for an ad, which is on a bidding system. So all of these are interconnected systems out there, and you have to start cracking down on a lot of these.
Yeah, I think the area of reviews is like ripe for innovation, because there's the dedicated review sites, and then there's sites that kind of do like maybe like I'm just going to think of like in the tech world, you'll have companies that do like top 10 items or whatever like that, and those are also, you don't know what kind of sponsorships they have in the background. Some will disclose it, some won't. And then even like if you go to YouTube and you try to like look up a review, sometimes I'll find when I'm looking for a product, there's like the review by the channel that has like 1 million subscribers and the video that's been watched up, 1 million times or something like that. And you don't really know if they're sponsored or not. The bigger the channel is, they'll usually say if they're sponsored, but there could be a long game, and you don't really have a lot of trust in that unless that reviewer has built that trust somehow. But then if you find the review that's given by the person with like 30 views and like dim lighting and probably not even that great of a review, I will take that review and watch that and those types of reviews significantly more than like the highly produced large videos, because I know at least this guy with 30 views is not getting like sponsorship. He's not biased by anything. He's just doing it probably because he wants to make it, basically, or share his information. And I find that to be a lot better. And building trust into reviews is probably an area that could grow a lot. And it's very hard because you probably need some kind of like verification system, and you really want to tie like true identities and put your name behind something, not being hid by like pseudonyms or anything. So it could be good, but we'll see. I guess if anything good happens there.
Credibility and business model go hand in hand. When a business gets greedy, the credibility goes down, and we have seen this again and again. Why does Wikipedia still is credible? Why is Craigslist still a credible, even after a couple of decades out there? Simple. They basically charge what they need, and they are not under pressure to keep increasing revenues, and there's no investors out there that are pressuring them.
That's it.
So along with that comes the credibility. So we need a Wikipedia of reviews that has a credible system out there that is not in the business of maximizing revenues year over year.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we need reviews on a blockchain. That could be the crypto push.
I'm waiting for, they started out as review sites, and then they moved over like all the other industries because of the opportunities to capture attention. They all seem to go from what they were originally focused on to ads and things of that nature.
Yeah, because I mean, even just a last tangent on the review stuff, we even see consolidation in the review site market, which is even the craziest things, that like one review site would want to buy another review site and then operate them independently or whatever, as if it's like two different voices. Like, you don't do that unless you know that it's a money-making machine, right? Ultimately, reviews should be like, I feel like a little bit more holistic and just helpful rather than a profit-driven thing, right? I understand you got to make some money here and there, but not to the point where you're like acquiring review sites for hundreds or multiple hundreds of millions of dollars, right? That's probably a good sign that something shady is happening there. Speaking of shadiness, I guess the flip side of the government doing good is there's always something bad to balance it out and keep it at the same equilibrium. And so I didn't think this was very good either. I'd be curious to see what you guys think on it. But there was a proposal that basically lets the IRS look into account statements and stuff like that for any bank account that's over $600. And the goal of it is to basically curtail, tax avoidance, things along those lines. It sounds good in theory, where you say that, we'll investigate bank accounts and make sure. But it has some negative connotations, because now that basically most bank accounts are going to have over $600 in it if it's your primary checking account that you're paying your rent and normal bills on, right? And so now they'll be able to snoop into every single one of those. And it's kind of unnecessary, because to me, it's like, why would you make the limit $600? Like, why would you not make it like $100,000? So you're targeting the people that actually have a lot of money in their bank account. Targeting $600 is like, that's such a low barrier, and you're just like screwing over like the people who are probably getting paid in like tips or doing odd jobs or cash jobs and things like that. And like, it could be like a class thing too, but it just generally just didn't seem bad. And there's no reason the government should be digging into this thing. Basically, they want to be able to track the bank account inflows and outflows and correlate that with your W-2 statements and make sure that you don't have like some weird money from somewhere else coming into it. Yeah, in general. And I'm pretty sure if you get audited, if I'm not mistaken, the government can already look at these bank accounts. And so like if they choose to audit you, they can already dig into it and see all the transactions that are going on. But this is just like proactively, like pre-audit, we're going to look around and see everything that's going on and identify stuff. I mean, I feel like you hope that it could be used for good, maybe, but I feel like there's more bad than good, and I don't really trust government competence in this regard. So like, it probably won't do anything in the first place. But what do you guys think about having your accounts looked at?
Well, we just said government is taking one step forward and 10 steps back. That's how I see it. And unfortunately, we were talking about if the government itself is in the business of privacy abuse, should we expect to pass some laws on the privacy protection? And again, it goes to our previous point. Maybe Clearview is right in the sense that it's betting in the country. So because they are, if the government itself is abusing privacy, well, what does that show when it comes to the companies that are operating in here? I think that's not a good sign, and this is going to be a very slippery slope.
Boy, yeah, I totally agree with everything that was said, and I know it's like it's a privacy haven on one end, but somehow it's like we just did a jujitsu move and said, well, maybe not. I mean, maybe it's just still a privacy grab for certain entities, and the consumers once again get kind of the negative on both of these things. If you think about it, it's not good when it's when we're known as a place to go to if you don't want to have to deal with privacy regulation. Mm-hmm. So that's not good for consumers. And then on this end, this is not good for consumers either. At least I don't think so. So it's like we're getting the worst of both worlds here. Is that what we just outlined? And that's not good. I was feeling pretty good. We were doing some good. You had some positivity.
Got to bring you back down to reality.
It's like I feel like the guy from the Godfather. Every time I try to get out, you guys bring me back in. So, I don't know. That was a bad. I don't like this. It's just that one's irritating.
Every time a government introduces something, and it's a lot of these cases, it's a slippery slope, and it doesn't end. That is just the first small hole being poked, and that is going to become a tunnel very soon. Even something like income tax. Remember, income tax used to be a temporary thing. During the Civil War, it was introduced to fund the war. I think during the Civil War.
You say remember like we were there. Like
I'm like, wait a minute.
That was such an anecdote. Like, oh, remember back in the day.
Or at least something we learned in the past. But it started as 2 to 3% during the Civil War. But now, where is that 2 to 3% range? And everyone takes income tax for granted, right? So I guess we are heading down the path of everyone taking privacy abuse for granted. 100 years from now, I don't think it'll take 100 years, but the way things are going. Okay. But, it kind of, you first start with IRS wanting that data. Later, at some point in the very near future, it will be expanded to, let's say, your mortgage. Your banks will want transaction information so that they can check your credibility to issue a mortgage to buy a house. And then see it expanding towards credit score. Maybe Experian and all these companies will want that information to be tracked into. So the size of the hole keeps expanding until it becomes a tunnel into your privacy.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for making me feel even worse there, right?
I mean, yeah, and then in general, just like you, like how many government programs like this really end up like exceeding expectations? So like I think there's a number that like 400 billion is what they try to like get back in like tax avoidance and stuff from this thing. But like, have you ever heard of like a program that like really crushes it and is like, oh, this is great. Like we gotta. It exceeded expectations, right? So that means that's like your top line number, probably a lot lower. And then I've read a bunch of articles basically saying like you could do a lot more with other types of government traction. And like wealthy people don't have this problem, right? Like you're going to have your money in 7 different ways and pay like some accountant, $500,000 a year, 100 grand a year, whatever, to shuffle it around. Cayman Islands, yeah, like cheaper to buy a private plane and just fly back and forth and have your bank account there and pick up wads of cash than it is to deal with anything in the U.S. So like, I don't know, not very good.